The locket begged to be returned, but with each passing hour, unanswered questions tightened around her throat like a noose. Staring at the glimmer of the locket, Sarah felt the tide of her own worth crashing against the rocks of her father's grounded ideals. Torn between loyalty and the developing bond she shared with Mark, the realization struck hard. Her own personal conflict mirrored his silent wounds. Would she have the courage to speak out, disrupt the fragile balance of their worlds? In a heart-stopping instant, the burden of what she had uncovered twisted in her, a riptide pulling her deeper into a turbulent sea of consequences. Tomorrow held the promise of confrontation, but tonight, within the confines of this unwelcoming building, neither her emotions nor her choices felt safe. What lay ahead loomed uncertain and fraught with tension. Would she unravel the truth that bound her destiny to Mark, or tighten the chains of her own limitations forever? The following day emerged with a stark contrast to the one prior. The sun's rays penetrated the corporate glass facade, but instead of illuminating her path, they only added to Sarah's anxiety, intensifying the shadows of doubt that lurked beneath her surface. She felt the cold weight of the locket in her pocket, a constant reminder of the truth she'd unearthed, a truth entwined deeply with her own aspirations and fears. Taking a deep breath, she entered the building, each step echoing with the resolve she tried to muster. As she navigated through the halls, the polished marble seemed colder than usual, reflecting the stone-cold demeanor of the employees who hovered within. Was she merely an intruder in this world, a stain on its pristine image? The thought gnawed at her confidence, but determination began to spark a flame within. Once at her father's side, Sarah observed the hustle and bustle of the corporate culture. People moved with an intensity that was foreign to her. They spoke in clipped tones and exchanged knowing glances, their conversations a dance of corporate jargon she barely understood. Yet within that whirlwind lay a strange allure. How they commanded the space, their voices ringing with authority. Could she claim that kind of presence? The locket in her pocket thrummed with possibility, yet heaviness came with the realization that it could just as easily be her downfall. As her father moved to begin the day's cleaning, Sarah lingered in the break room, where coffee brewed relentlessly, its rich aroma filling the air. She gripped the locket tightly, closing her eyes and visualizing the moment of confrontation with Mark. Would he see in her the depths of despair mirrored in his late wife's photograph? Or would he look past her once again, into the sea of faces that usually surrounded him? Before she could spiral further, she felt a presence behind her. Turning, she faced Fiona, Mark's assistant, a polished woman whose gaze felt like a sharpened knife.
She could sense the challenges Fiona represented, a gatekeeper between herself and the world she yearned to penetrate. "Trouble sleeping?" Fiona quipped, a smirk dancing on her lips. "Not really, just thinking." Sarah's voice came out steadier than she felt, masking the whirlwind within. "Thinking or eavesdropping?" Fiona pressed, crossing her arms, an unmistakable challenge. Instead of backing down, Sarah decided to take a gamble. "I found something that belongs to Mr. Anderson," she said, the words spilling with unexpected firmness. Fiona's smirk faltered for a fraction of a second, but that was enough for Sarah. It was a crack in the armor, a glimpse of vulnerability beneath the surface. Maybe the power dynamics could be shifted slightly. "You wouldn't want to get caught up in something you can't handle," Fiona warned, her tone a blend of condescension and concern. "What if I can?" Sarah countered, heart racing, feeling something within her sharpening into clarity, like a blade honing its edge. The tension in Fiona's gaze was palpable, but before they could delve deeper, the office buzzed with activity, the imminent arrival of Mark. As the staff sprang into action, Sarah felt the heat of opportunity igniting within her. This was her moment. Taking a breath, she silently resolved. She would hand over the locket, expose her find, and face whatever came next head on. With each passing second, the stakes rose, and so too did her pulse, quickening in anticipation of confrontation. But would the truth bring her closer to Mark, or unearth more secrets she was unprepared to face? As she stood on the precipice of revelation, a flicker of doubt surfaced. What if the very truth she sought to deliver became her greatest vulnerability? Steeling herself, Sarah adjusted her grip on the locket and prepared to step into the fire, knowing she couldn't turn back. With Mark approaching, determination coursed through her veins. The confrontation was imminent, and her moment of reckoning began to crystallize just ahead. Would she step forward into the realm of influence, or retreat into the shadows once more? The door swung open. What awaited inside was uncertain, but Sarah would soon find out exactly how intertwined her fate was with the lives in this room. The moment stretched like a taut wire as Sarah remained rooted in place, the locket clutched tightly in her palm. Time seemed suspended, each tick of the clock echoing ominously against the silence that accompanied Mark's entrance. He stepped through the door, exuding an authority that made the air crackle with tension. "Good morning, everyone," he greeted, his voice rich and confident, commanding immediate attention. Sarah noticed the way people straightened, their expressions shifting as they sullied themselves with polite smiles, but she couldn't focus on them. Her eyes remained fixed on Mark, the man who held the key to the door she so desperately wanted to unlock.
Beneath her bravado, a flurry of self-doubt swirled. Was she ready for this? Would her words resonate, or would they drown in the polished veneer of corporate formality? She took a step forward, the movement both a declaration and a challenge to herself. "Mr. Anderson," she began, her voice trembling ever so slightly, but rising with purpose. "I have something for you, something important." Mark turned, his brow furrowing at the unfamiliarity of the voice addressing him. His attention felt like a spotlight, and for a moment it paralyzed her. She was merely the janitor's daughter, standing before a titan of industry. The insecurity that had haunted her since childhood threatened to swallow her whole, but she fought against it, refusing to retreat into anonymity. "I found this," she continued, pulling the locket from her pocket. The gold glimmered under the fluorescent lights, offering a stark contrast to the stark and sterile environment around them. "It belonged to your late wife." The room hushed, a symphony of disbelief. She could almost hear the collective intake of breath, a moment of realization hitting hard. Mark's expression shifted from curiosity to something deeper. Pain? Recognition? She couldn't tell, but that flicker in his eyes urged her on. His fingers reached out, trembling slightly as he accepted the locket. "How? Why do you have this?" he managed to ask, the veneer of stoicism beginning to crack. "It was with some belongings I came across," she replied, feeling a newfound strength swell within her as she stood taller. "I thought you deserved to have it back." The pause that followed felt dense with emotion. She was witnessing the unraveling of a man whose life, she surmised, was riddled with loss hidden beneath layers of corporate bravado. Was this the moment she had envisioned, or were they both merely actors in a tragedy unfolding? Mark lifted his gaze to meet hers, an intricate interplay of grief and gratitude playing on his features. "Thank you," he said, his voice softer now, almost vulnerable. You have no idea what this means." In that unexpected exchange, something shifted within Sarah. The locket was more than just a physical object connecting her to Mark. It represented the courage she had found within herself. She was no longer hiding behind shadows. She was stepping into the light. Fiona, observing from the sidelines, shifted uncomfortably, her expression darkening. "Perhaps you should be careful mixing in matters you don't fully understand, Sarah," she interjected, her tone dripping with thinly veiled contempt. But Sarah was no longer the hesitant girl who cowered in silence. "I'm not afraid, Fiona. This is about truth, and perhaps opening doors for others, even in unexpected places." The intensity of their standoff electrified the air. Fiona's eyes narrowed, assessing Sarah in a light that betrayed both threat and challenge.
The room seemed to contract around them, the remaining employees feeling like mere spectators at the dawning of a struggle for power, influence, and identity. With every heartbeat, Sarah understood that this was more than exchanging a locket. It was a declaration of her intent to carve her own space in a world that had previously overlooked her. The truth she had faced so far had unearthed her resilience. Now she was determined to see how far that strength could carry her. As the confrontation unfolded, it became all too clear. She was on the cusp of a metamorphosis that nobody, not even herself, had anticipated. But who would emerge as victor in this tug-of-war for agency? And what would it cost her to fully embrace her own power? The air was thick with uncertainty as she braced for the complexity of relationships about to ignite. The stakes had shifted profoundly, driving Sarah into an exhilarating, unpredictable future, one she was ready to take on. The air crackled with an intensity that left Sarah breathless. She watched as Mark's gaze lingered on the locket, his mind appearing to drift into a world far removed from the sterile office space. In that moment, the weight of unspoken words loomed heavy, not just for him, but for her as well. This was her opportunity to share her voice, a voice that had long been silenced by fear and doubt. "Mr. Anderson," she said, breaking the silence that had enveloped the room, "I know that loss can be a heavy burden. We can't always carry it alone." Each word solidified her presence, and she could feel a warmth surging through her, an affirmation of her own story emerging from the shadows. Mark finally turned his full attention to her, processing her words. She could see confusion and acknowledgement flitting across his features as he struggled to reconcile the layers of grief and corporate image. Was he beginning to see her as more than just the janitor's daughter? "Well, thank you," he reiterated, his voice low but edged with a sense of newfound respect. "You've surprised me today, Sarah." The skepticism from her coworkers had receded, replaced by curiosity. Does this shift in perception mean a new chapter was beginning for Sarah? The thought exhilarated her and terrified her at once. However, Fiona's voice sliced through the air like a serrated blade. "Just because you have a moment of clarity doesn't mean you're meant to pursue it, Sarah. Stay in your lane." Her comment dripped with disdain, but Sarah felt a flicker of defiance in the pit of her stomach. Was she truly ready to step beyond the boundaries imposed on her? "Why is it so threatening for you, Fiona?" Sarah challenged, her pulse quickening. "Is it because you see something in me you wish you had the courage to embrace yourself?" The challenge landed with audible silence, the tension hanging like a thick fog. Despite the apprehension swirling within, she sensed a transformation, an awakening of the fierce independence that had long lain dormant. Crushing the locket in her palm had not just linked her to Mark, it was a bridge leading her toward her own potential. As she turned back toward Mark, she chose her next words carefully. "I think sometimes we bury things we've lost to shield ourselves. You have the power to redefine your story." This wasn't just about delivering a message. It was about claiming her place, no longer merely a background character in someone else's narrative. Mark studied her with an intensity that made her feel both exposed and empowered. "You're right," he finally said, a tentative light returning to his eyes. "I've forgotten that stories can evolve." With renewed confidence, Sarah seized the moment. "Then let's shape our stories, Mr. Anderson, together." It was a bold proposal, but her heart raced with the thrill of challenge. This was where her journey transformed from passive acceptance to active engagement. As the office murmured with whispers, the implications of her words rippling outward,
Sarah realized the battle she would need to fight was not just against external forces, but within herself. Could she sustain this momentum? The ground had shifted, yet an undercurrent of turmoil remained, as Fiona's icy stare challenged her resolve. Sarah could feel Fiona's intention to undermine her growing power, a storm brewing just beneath the surface. But the thrill of agency coursed through her, igniting determination. This was just the beginning of her metamorphosis, and as she watched Mark absorb her message, she knew she had stepped into the ring. What would be the true cost of this newfound courage? Sarah's heart raced as she prepared to face whatever shadows lay ahead, knowing that the battle for her own narrative had only just begun. Would she continue to thrive in this newfound path, or was the real conflict still waiting to unfold? The day had started like any other. Sarah went through her morning routine in the dim light of the janitor's closet, the scent of disinfectant mingling with the faint aroma of coffee wafting from the break room. But as she grabbed her cleaning supplies, the events of yesterday replayed in her mind, vivid and electrifying. The confrontation with Fiona lingered, igniting a blend of fear and excitement. Today felt different. Each step she took through the office on her shifts felt heavier, the ground beneath her feet more solid. She glanced at her coworkers, their eyes betraying a mix of curiosity and disbelief. Was she now viewed through a different lens, the janitor's daughter who dared to stand tall? She caught Mark's eye across the room as he engaged in conversation with the team. The brief nod he gave her ignited an unexpected warmth. It was a signal that perhaps today would not simply resume the ordinary. In those moments, she recalled the clarity she had experienced when she spoke her truth. If this newfound clarity was to mean anything, it had to be more than just a passing moment.
Throughout her day, Sarah's mind raced with ideas, flickering like the fluorescent lights she diligently polished. With a sudden impulse, she snatched a nearby notepad and began jotting down all the thoughts colliding in her head. How could she leverage this momentum? What changes could she propose that would not only impact her own narrative, but also resonate within the confines of this corporate behemoth? The more she wrote, the more her confidence surged, her insecurities battling for dominance. A sudden wave of determination crashed over her. She envisioned herself drafting an idea for an internal seminar, one that focused on rediscovering personal narratives, an initiative that would allow everyone in her office to share their stories of loss and resilience. It was audacious, maybe even reckless, but it was also liberating. Her thought process was interrupted when Fiona's voice cut through the air. "What are you doing, Sarah? Writing fairy tales?" The derision, tinged with genuine disbelief, struck her like a lightning bolt. Sarah's heart raced, but instead of retreating, adrenaline surged through her veins. "I'm building a foundation," she stated boldly, surprising even herself. "Maybe you should try it sometime." Fiona's eyes narrowed, and for an instant, Sarah felt raw vulnerability wash over her. Had she just put a target on her back? The thought alone made her hesitate. But it was too late to retract her words. She had thrust herself into a new reality. Conflicted emotions churned. She needed to solidify her new role and find allies amidst the whispers of skepticism. Mark had expressed interest in her ideas, and so she decided to approach him during his lunch break. The thought pulled her forward, growing on the hope of being seen beyond her current position. As she entered the conference room, a pulse of anxiety quickened in her chest. Mark was seated alone, reviewing a draft, when he looked up to find Sarah standing there, a resolved expression on her face. "I wanted to discuss something with you," she began, her voice steady despite the tumult in her stomach. "I have this idea for a seminar, something to foster a connection through storytelling. It could really reshape how we communicate as a team." Her words birthed a silence that felt too loud, filling every crevice of the space. Mark leaned back, curiosity dancing in his eyes. "Go on." The moment spread out before her like an uncharted horizon. Could this be her true beginning, a step toward genuine engagement that reached beyond the constraints of her position?
But Fiona's looming presence in the building weighed heavily on her. Would she find support among the others? And as Sarah began to outline her vision, she felt a new conflict taking shape within. The implications of risking vulnerability weighed on her, the fear of rejection clinging to her thoughts. Yet, as Mark listened, intrigued, a familiar determination rose within her. As they compiled their final presentation, Sarah discovered hidden depths within herself. Her ability to strategize, articulate ideas, and bring people together seamlessly. Mark's mentorship illuminated facets she had previously overlooked. He saw her potential even when she struggled to recognize it in herself. Despite the rush of adrenaline, moments of self-doubt invaded her thoughts. What if the seminar fell flat? What if Fiona dismantled every argument they presented? Gradually, she learned to transform those fears into fuel. Every what-if became an opportunity for growth. The day of presentation arrived, and Sarah's heart beat a frantic rhythm. Standing before the decision-makers, equipped with Mark's support and her freshly minted proposal, she felt the weight of her struggles and the reality of her aspirations pressing on her shoulders. They began the presentation with confidence, the air crackling with palpable energy. Yet, when the questioning commenced, uncertainty and Fiona's piercing glare took aim. What qualifies you to lead this initiative? Fiona's voice sliced through the room, challenging Sarah's resolve. The question hung in the air, heavy and thick, as tension pulsed through Sarah's veins. It was not just a challenge from Fiona. It was the embodiment of all her insecurities. Was she truly equipped to inspire, engage, create? Did she have the right to mold narratives? As she started to respond, Sarah found her voice. I have walked into this office every day with a story that has shaped me. I know what it feels like to be unheard. This is not just about titles, but about humanity. If we can learn to see each other beyond our roles, we can transform our work lives into something profoundly more meaningful. The moment crystallized. Sarah, stripped of her past, stood on the threshold of a new chapter. But Fiona's retort loomed, and with it hung the potential for either validation or defeat. Would she truly rise to the occasion, or would the fear-stricken remnants of her old self drag her back into shadows? The verdict of her colleagues teetered on the edge, the battle for her narrative spiraling toward its fiercest confrontation yet. In the silence that followed her declaration, Sarah's pulse quickened, the weight of Fiona's scrutiny pressing down as sharply as any reprimand she could remember. Each breath felt heavier, thick with the possibility of rejection. This moment, focused with stark clarity, was pivotal. The air pulsated with potential, crackling with the energy of what might come next. Fiona leaned back in her chair, arms crossed, a smirk teetering on her lips. Sarah could practically see the gears turning in her mind as she prepared her rebuttal, a counteroffensive to dismantle the very essence of Sarah's newfound confidence. It was easy to feel like a fragile facade under that gaze, her voice suddenly wavering in a sea of doubt. Then something shifted. Steeled determination coursed through Sarah like an electric current. She recognized the fight behind Fiona's condescension. It was resistance to change, a fear of vulnerability, perhaps even a vestige of her own past insecurities reflected back at her. Sarah refused to be that version of herself again. "So, you believe it's not possible?" she countered, her voice steady now, as if a newfound strength had emerged from within. She could feel Mark's presence beside her, a buoy of reassurance, radiating support. "You think sharing our stories is less than valuable? Look around this room. What if we don't want to be just cogs in a machine?" Murmurs rippled through the crowd, an undercurrent she hadn't anticipated, but desperately needed. Several faces among the decision-makers softened, curiosity overshadowing prior skepticism. It felt as though Sarah was thrust into unfamiliar territory, an uncharted landscape where her value was not determined by title or position, but by the authenticity of her narrative. Yet Fiona was unyielding, her posture becoming a fortress against Sarah's encroaching initiative. Telling stories is nice in theory, Sarah, but our results aren't driven by emotional connection. They're driven by numbers, she snapped, pulling everyone back to the comfort of established metrics. Numbers. The very chains binding Sarah to doubt threatened to constrict her voice once more. But within the twining tendrils of anxiety, she seized an insight that sparked clarity. This was not about numbers. It was about people, stories, connections. I understand your point, Fiona, but those result-driven numbers reflect lives. Behind every statistic lies a story worth telling. The moment she spoke those words, Sarah felt a shift, not just in the assembly, but within herself. She acknowledged that fear would always lurk, but it wouldn't dictate her course. She looked into the crowd and saw faces, each one a reflection of shared experiences, each story a portrait of resilience waiting to be unveiled. Perhaps, Sarah continued, her voice bolder, if we empower our team to share those stories, we can uncover untapped potential, foster collaboration, and enhance our company culture. Isn't that worth pursuing? Fiona's glare intensified, yet Sarah could feel the tide beginning to shift. For the first time, she was formidable. Not just another employee with a quiet voice, but a custodian of shared human experiences. The challenge had transformed her fears into daggers, each word she spoke stripping away the layers of conformism. The decision-makers traded glances, their expressions flickering between uncertainty and intrigue, as Sarah pressed on, articulating the profound impact this initiative could yield. Her voice surged with conviction, fueled by a newfound understanding of her own capabilities. As the room swayed toward contemplation, Fiona finally offered a clipped, "We will discuss this further."
The ambiguity faded, essentially leaving Sarah balanced on the precipice of potential acceptance and opposition, a delicate equilibrium that held resonance with every story she had suppressed for too long. As she stepped away from the presentation, adrenaline coursing through her veins, the weight of doubt evaporated, replaced with a galvanizing sense of purpose. What had started as a suggestion had morphed into a firm grasp on her identity. But even as excitement lit her path, shadows lurked. Fiona would not back down easily. A confrontation loomed, a truth she knew she would have to face head-on. It was a challenge, a test of endurance, with stakes far beyond a proposal, now interwoven with her identity. Soon, Sarah would have to decide. Would she become the embodiment of her vision, or would she retreat into the shadows once more? The answer lingered in the air, pregnant with possibility. A challenge that both terrified and exhilarated her as she breathed deeply and turned away from the threshold of her own defining moments. Though the meeting had ended, the echoes of Sarah's words lingered in the air like a resolute battle cry. With each step toward her desk, she could feel the remnants of uncertainty artfully fading. She replayed the moment repeatedly, dissecting her emotions with an almost clinical precision. The sheer energy of vocalizing her beliefs ignited something deep within her, a glimmer of potential she hadn't known existed. As she sat at her workstation, the flickering fluorescent lights overhead felt warmer, almost like a spotlight casting encouragement on her. Sarah took a moment to gather her thoughts, mapping the next steps she needed to take. The impending confrontation with Fiona loomed large in her mind, a storm cloud threatening to rain down criticism. But rather than cower, she resolved to approach their next interactions with strategy, prepared to defend her vision. The constant barrage of analytical metrics she had encountered made her mind race with possibilities. How could she transform cold statistics into vibrant stories that connected the team? A small smile crept across her face as a vision crystallized. Workshops, brainstorm sessions, storytelling circles. The idea blossomed, building like vivid brushstrokes, creating a dynamic painting. She glanced over at Mark, who was deep in concentration on his tasks. He had been a steadfast ally, willing to listen, encouraging her to embrace her initiative.
She felt compelled to share her plans, to harness their collective strengths. As she approached his desk, uncertainty flitted through her mind. What if her enthusiasm fell flat? "Hey, Mark," she began, her tone tentative but hopeful. "I was thinking that maybe we could brainstorm together. I've got some ideas that could really amplify the impact of what we discussed in the meeting." Mark looked up, his brow furrowing in concentration, but soon his trademark grin broke through. "Absolutely. I think what you proposed has immense potential," he said enthusiastically. "What do you have in mind?" Sarah felt a rush of adrenaline surge through her. They spent the next hour flipping ideas back and forth, sketching out a framework for an initiative that would encourage vulnerability and storytelling within the company. As they collaborated, barriers melted, allowing Sarah to articulate her views without inhibition. "Once we get this rolling, I think it'll really harness what makes our team unique," Mark noted, his tone encouraging. "Your perspective is crucial to shifting our work culture." His words were like fuel to a simmering fire within her. She recognized the necessity of cultivating connections beyond the surface, fostering a network of shared experiences. With every suggestion they discussed, Sarah felt a paradoxical blend of joy and anxiety. She was stepping into uncharted territory, unearthing depths of capability she hadn't known resided within her. However, while her excitement burgeoned, the specter of Fiona's skepticism hovered just beyond the periphery of her mind. Sarah knew their inevitable confrontation was necessary, a pivotal moment that would forge her identity in the workplace. Fiona likely viewed Sarah's initiatives as a threat, an encroachment into her meticulously crafted business model. As the day drew to a close, Sarah found herself restless, an overwhelming anticipation coursing through her veins. She had to confront Fiona, assertively yet diplomatically, to prevent her doubts from spiraling back into self-inflicted limitation. Tonight, before heading to bed, she would arm herself with research, studies, success stories from other companies, even data illustrating the potency of employee-driven initiatives. The knowledge would be her shield against Fiona's opposition. But as she prepared to leave the office, doubt punctured her resolve for a fleeting moment. What if she failed? What if her vision crumbled under Fiona's critical gaze? The possibility of rejection was a bitter reality, one that left an acrid taste in her mouth. Yet in that uncertainty, Sarah found solace in the clarity of her purpose. She wouldn't merely be defending a proposal. She was standing up for her newfound self, a transformation that transcended the proposal itself. With her bag slung over her shoulder, determination replaced trepidation as she walked toward the exit. Outside, the city glowed with potential, reflecting the fire ignited within her. She was ready to face Fiona, to reclaim her narrative, to challenge the status quo. Thus, as the night enveloped her, a burgeoning possibility shimmered ahead. The next step was more than a mere conversation. It was a chance to lay bare her vision and confront the shadows of doubt that sought to cling to her. And as Sarah stepped into the cool evening air, she could almost hear the quiet whisper of change urging her on. Was she prepared to face Fiona and fully embrace her identity? Time would reveal the answer. The next morning arrived with the brightness of promise and the heaviness of dread etched into Sarah's mind. Her thoughts danced along a tightrope, balancing confidence and fear as she made her way to the office. With every step, her resolve strengthened, yet a flicker of apprehension remained. Today, she would confront Fiona, not only to pitch her ideas, but to carve out a piece of herself within the company's fabric. As she entered the office, the familiar backdrop of machines whirring and colleagues engaged in hushed conversations felt oddly comforting. The energy distinguished between the mundane and the significant, and Sarah clung to that distinction as she approached her desk. The warm scent of freshly brewed coffee wafting through the air renewed her determination, allowing her to hone her focus on a single goal, engaging Fiona in a way that might foster understanding. "Have you seen the latest metrics for last quarter's project?" Mark asked, breaking her concentration as he joined her. Not yet, she replied, pushing her thoughts back to the present. But I have to talk to Fiona first. Mark nodded, his expression steeled with seriousness. You got this. Remember, you're not just voicing ideas, you're sharing a vision that can benefit the whole team. Taking a deep breath, Sarah was ready to present a narrative that connected personal stories with the statistics that seemed so disheartening at times. She visualized her proposal, the storytelling circles and collaborative brainstorms, a means to humanize the data, transforming figures into relatable experiences. This was it. She would use her understanding of numbers to forge an emotional connection that could sway Fiona. When Sarah stepped into Fiona's office, she felt a wave of assertiveness wash over her. Fiona sat behind her imposing mahogany desk, her gaze sharp and assessing. "Sarah," she greeted, leaning back slightly, "what's on your mind?" "I'd like to discuss some ideas that could enhance our team dynamics," Sarah began, steeling herself against the probing intensity of Fiona's stare. "I believe fostering a more communicative atmosphere will not only boost morale, but also improve our productivity metrics." Fiona's eyebrows rose in skepticism. "And how do you intend to achieve that without disrupting the workflow?" As they spoke, Sarah felt the tension pulse like a living thing. Each word exchanged charged with the potential for conflict. By establishing storytelling sessions where team members can share their experiences related to company goals, we can connect the data to human narratives, bridging the gap between cold numbers and the emotional intelligence that drives our work. Fiona's lips pursed, and Sarah pressed on, sensing a fluctuating shift. She outlined the research she had gathered, making her case with clarity and vigor. Each statistic she presented resonated with Fiona's skepticism, transforming moments of confrontation into opportunities for connection. But just as the mood began to soften, Fiona cut in. "Sarah, while your enthusiasm is commendable, these ideas deviate from our structured approach. You'll have to convince me with more than just passion." Suddenly fierce, Sarah felt the heat of determination rise. This was not a mere proposal, it was a testament to her growth. "I understand, but I believe the way we approach our work is exactly the reason we're not where we need to be in terms of productivity. Let's invest in our people, empowering them through voice and experience. If we can share as individuals, we can see the bigger picture clearer." As she spoke, the words flowed with conviction. The fear of rejection was quickly overtaken by the urgency to share her vision. But with each heartbeat, a part of her worried that Fiona would never see the value in her transformative narrative. Sarah could sense Fiona weighing her options, the tension thick enough to slice through the silence of the office. Each moment felt suspended in uncertainty. What if this was the line crossed between acceptance and dismissal? Just as Fiona opened her mouth to respond, the phone on her desk rang sharply, slicing through their standoff. Potentially derailing the momentum they had built, it simultaneously awoke a flicker of hope in Sarah's chest. Was that call a distraction or a chance for an unexpected pivot? In that instant, Sarah knew she was one question away from either solidifying her ambitions or retreating into the shadows once more. Could she find the words to clinch this opportunity? Would this confrontation define her narrative and pave the way for change? The looming answer tantalized her. Sarah stood at the crossroads of potential and trepidation, feeling the weight of history pressing against her chest. The phone continued to ring, an interlude to the palpable tension clinging to the air. In that heartbeat, she grasped that this moment was not defined solely by Fiona's skepticism or rejection. It was an opportunity to reclaim her narrative, one that had long been tethered to her identity as the janitor's daughter. "Fiona," she began, her voice emerging with a steadiness that surprised even her, "I know this isn't what we're used to, but isn't that exactly what we need? We've been playing it safe for too long, and it's time to embrace a new way of connecting. The phone was still ringing, and with each pulse, Sarah felt her own heartbeat synchronize with it, an unfamiliar rhythm of hope punctuating her proclamation. The words spilled forth, fueled by newfound conviction. People thrive in environments where they feel heard. We have stories that can conjure connection, create empathy, and ultimately drive results. When our colleagues share their experiences, it will translate into passion that feeds into our productivity. Fiona's gaze sharpened, revealing a crack in her stoic wall. And you think a storytelling session can actually improve results, Sarah? We're a corporation, not a support group. Yes, the fervor in Sarah surprised herself. But what if we could be both? Why does it have to be either or? Leadership relies on more than charts and figures. It thrives on understanding and relationships. Another pause haunted the space between them, dense and fragile. Then Sarah added, "Fiona, it's time we see our coworkers as whole people, not just names on a spreadsheet. Let's bring their humanity back into the workplace." In that moment, the phone finally ceased its ringing, and silence enveloped them, leaving Sarah hanging on a precipice of expectation. For a heartbeat, she feared that she'd spoken too boldly, but she refused to retreat. The stakes were too high. She could feel it deep in her core. Fiona's expression revealed a struggle, a battle between tradition and the undeniable allure of Sarah's vision. Yet something was beginning to shift beneath the surface. The tension felt slightly less antagonistic, and for the first time, Sarah glimpsed a potential ally in Fiona's formidable armor. "Perhaps you have a point," Fiona admitted, her voice almost tentative. "But you will have to provide a clear outline of how these sessions will align with our goals. I can't support a notion without tangible results." In that critical moment, Sarah's heart surged with a blend of pride and excitement. Fiona's openness was a flicker of hope, a green light where once there had been only red. "Absolutely," she responded, buoyed by an energetic resolve. "I can present metrics that highlight similar successful initiatives in other companies, proof that this works. All I ask for is a chance to prove its worth." The transformation was tangible, like the air had thickened and then released with a crackle of energy. For the first time, Sarah was no longer just fighting for her voice. She was positioned as a genuine contributor to change, authentically weaving her narrative into the corporate structure. As she shared her excitement about the workshop and the potential stories to be unveiled, she noticed something shift in Fiona's demeanor. No longer did she appear dismissive. Instead, curiosity and caution commingled in her expression. "Following this discussion, I'll consider your proposal and give you a chance to put together a formal presentation for our next leadership meeting," Fiona stated, her voice steady now, but laced with both caution and opportunity. "Thank you." Relief washed over Sarah, but this victory was just the beginning. The real battle, navigating her place amidst the institutional structures and proving that people's stories mattered, had only just commenced. With renewed ambition flickering in her veins, Sarah exited Fiona's office with a grin illuminating her face. She was no longer shrouded in self-doubt. Instead, empowered by the courage to confront adversities, she envisioned the pathways unfolding before her. As she stepped out, ready to engage her colleagues and map out the next steps, clarity enveloped her prospects. The storytelling initiative was not merely about the exchange of narratives. It was a manifesto for change, grounded in collective experiences and individual growth. The journey ahead would require solidarity, courage, and perhaps another confrontation with Fiona. But now, Sarah was firmly planted on her own ground, her identity forged anew. Not only the janitor's daughter, but an architect of her own narrative, expanding into her role with firm confidence. This was the moment Sarah had long awaited. It signaled an end to a life of feeling like an invisible thread in the tapestry of a larger story. Now, she was standing at the intersection of her own evolving plotline. No more shadows. A spotlight awaited, and with it came a call to action to mold her story into something impactful and resonant. Sarah was ready to expand her horizons and take charge of her professional and personal journey. The narrative ahead was rich with potential, bursting with the promise of connection, understanding, and transformative growth. And in the larger narrative, amidst the unfolding chapters of her life, she had finally found her voice and the courage to harness it into meaningful change. Now is the time for you to take action. You need to subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories that will captivate and inspire you. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and keep these empowering stories alive. Comment your reactions and theories about Sarah's incredible journey and what it means to overcome personal struggles and embrace your voice. Share this video instantly with at least 5 friends who need to hear this conclusion. Don't wait even one more second to share the empowerment message. Only true fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions. You are part of this journey too.